Good morning. Welcome to this meeting of the Assembly Committee on Government Affairs for the 2025 legislative session. Will the secretary please call the roll?
Assembly members Carter,
Present.
DeLong,
I'm here.
De Silva,
Here.
Edgeworth, Flanagan, Gallant,
Here.
Golding, Gurr, Hunt, Jackson, Karras, Kusama, Wynn, sorry, Considine.
And I'm present. Thank you. Welcome to the audience in Carson City, those joining by video conference in Las Vegas, and those listening over the internet. I'd like to begin with some housekeeping measures. First, please silence your electronic devices. If you wish to testify, please sign in at the table by the door and provide a business card to the committee secretary. When testifying, please turn the microphone on and clearly state your name and any affiliation for the record. Turn the microphone off each time you're done speaking. If you're providing handouts, please ensure that hard copies are available for members of the public and that electronic copies should have been submitted to the committee manager by 9 a.m. yesterday. We do expect courtesy and respect in our interactions during this meeting, even if we disagree with someone else's position. I encourage committee members to ask questions and engage with the material presented. If you have any follow-up questions, please flag them for me so that we can ensure that we balance our time effectively during today's meetings. And committee members will be using their laptops to view handouts and other documents. Please do not interpret this as a sign of disrespect or inattention. With that, we can get started. Today, we're going to hear two bills followed by two presentations. First, we will hear Assembly Bill 8, which revises provisions relating to state financial administration, and then Assembly Bill 22, which revises provisions relating to the Public Employees Benefits Program, PEB. After the bills, we will hear presentations from Story County and the City of Fernley. I will now open the hearing on Assembly Bill 8. This bill comes to us on behalf of the Legislative Committee for the Review and Oversight of the Tahoe Regional Planning Agency and the Marlette Lake Water System. To present this measure, we have Assembly Member Ken Gray and someone who will be introduced. Please go ahead whenever you're ready.
Good morning, Madam Chair, committee members. Thank you, and for the record, I am Assemblyman Ken Gray, Gray. To my right, I've got Jonathan Brunges with State Parks, and hopefully I didn't butcher that too bad. So I'm Assembly District 39. I cover Douglas and Lyon counties. Today I'm presenting Assembly Bill 8, which revises provisions relating to state financial administration. The bill before you today is a recommendation from the Legislative Committee for the Review and Oversight of the Tahoe Regional Planning Agency and the Marlette Water System. I would like to first begin with some brief background information that explains what led to this recommendation. The state of Nevada has many wonders, including its vast array of state parks. Locals and visitors alike flock to destinations like Sand Harbor and Valley of the Fire to experience their beauty, history, and recreational activities. In Sand Harbor, for example, more than 3,000 visitors may enter the park on summer days, with numbers totaling nearly 1.3 million visitors in 2023. While it's exciting that so many people take joy in the splendor of our state, this mass of visitors creates a problem for our state parks from an operational standpoint. Currently, language sets forth requirements for certain state officers, departments, and commissions to deposit the public money they receive. If the money accumulated for deposit is $10,000 or more, it must be deposited not later than the next working day. Nevada Division of State Parks within the State Department of Conservation and Natural Resources explained that this requirement creates difficulties for parks like Sand Harbor, as daily collections frequently exceed that amount. In order for these parks to comply with existing law, they may have to divert already limited staff away from their duties at the parks during business hours. Assembly Bill 8 seeks to remedy this concern by applying an exemption to this requirement. I'd like to now briefly summarize the bill. Namely, it exempts the Division of State Parks from the requirement to deposit $10,000 or more accumulated during any day by the next working day, and instead requires the division to deposit the money within 10 working days. Just so you guys know, this exemption is already in place for Nevada's Department of Wildlife. In conclusion, this is a common sense measure passed with unanimous support by the interim committee. It allows state parks to focus on the day-to-day requirements and operations, welcoming visitors into our parks, and instead of pulling them away on a possibly daily basis to meet the deposit deadline. I urge your support for this important measure, and I thank you for the opportunity to present this bill. And we will stand by for any questions you guys may have.
Okay, thank you very much. Members, do we have any questions? We'll start with Assemblymember Goulding.
Thank you, Chair. Can you explain how you got to 10 days?
Jonathan Brunges, Deputy Administrator for Nevada Division of State Parks, for the record. It's the exemption that's already in place in statute for the Department of Wildlife, and we just wanted to add our department or our division in that same language with them.
Would you be comfortable with a shorter period of time, say 5 days?
Jonathan Brunges, Nevada State Parks, for the record. We would be happy with that.
Thank you. And then would you spell your name for the record, please?
Sure. Jonathan Brunges, again, for the record, Nevada State Parks, Jonathan, Brunges, Brunjes.
Thank you. Our next question is from Assemblymember Karas.
Good morning, and it's good to hear that our parks are doing well. I myself was finally up at Sand Harbor just 2 weeks ago. I see the problem that you're facing. My question would be, have you put thought into how you're going to secure the funds for the 10-day or 5-day span?
Jonathan Brunges, Nevada State Parks, for the record. We follow all the state guidelines for securing those funds now. Our challenge is mostly because of weekends. We're unlike most state offices where we operate on the weekends, and we're 24/7. And so our goal is not to wait till that 5 or 10 day, is to do it as soon as we can. But taking our staff out of the parks on a busy weekend is a real challenge for us.
Thank you. Thank you, Chair.
Madam Chair, if I can add something to that. Ken Gray for the record. This actually addresses, when this bill came before us, this bill actually addresses a security concern I had of mine. And it wasn't so much the storage, but it was the predictability of when a staff member would leave every day when they exceed that 10,000. So now we're throwing in some unexpectedness, and they won't be able to time it and hit them.
Thank you. Our next question is from Assemblymember Kasama.
Thank you, Chair. I think some of the questions, but mine was the security of the money, and you say you're doing it with, the prescribed procedures. But could you just expand a little bit more? Is it lock boxes? Does somebody accompany one of the staff members when they go to the bank, or just a little bit more oversight on that?
Sure, thank you for the question. Jonathan Brunges, Nevada State Parks, for the record. We have safes in all of our buildings. Most of those buildings have alarm systems. It's typically a law enforcement officer that has taken that deposit to the bank. So we do everything we can to be careful with that and make sure measures are in place to be safe.
Great, thank you.
Thank you. And our last question is from Assemblymember Gallant.
Thank you, Chair. Good morning. I'm curious, I think, if I recall, I read something in the bill that it needed to be daily. So you were going to the bank almost every day. How are you doing that on the weekends when the bank is closed? I mean, it seems like we were putting you in a position to sort of fudge on the statute. Was it?
Sorry, and Jonathan Brunges, for the record, I think it says working day. And so for us, it is a working day. And so we're doing either a night deposit or a drop into the bank. And which is another problem. We have to wait till the next business day for the bank to get that paperwork back for us to process it to the treasurer's office.
Thank you.
All right, thank you so much for the presentation. We will now move on to support for AB 8. Testimony can be provided in person in Carson City, via video conference in Las Vegas, or over the phone. Further instructions for providing testimony on a bill can be found on the agenda. Each person will have 2 minutes to provide testimony. Please keep your remarks to the point. And first, we will hear testimony in support of AB 8. Do we have anyone in Carson City wishing to provide support for AB 8? Seeing none, we'll move to Las Vegas. Is there anyone in Las Vegas in support? Seeing no one in Las Vegas, we'll move on to AVH. AVH, is there anyone online in support for AB 8?
Chair, the public line is open and working. We have no callers for support of AB 8.
Thank you. Next, we will move to testimony in opposition of AB 8. Do we have anyone in Carson City in opposition? Seeing no one approaching and seeing no one in Las Vegas, I will move to AVH. Is there anyone on the line in opposition?
We have no callers in opposition of AB 8 at this time.
Thank you. And then moving to neutral. Anyone in Carson City neutral wanted to testify? Okay, and seeing still no one in Las Vegas, AVH, back to you.
The public line is open and working. We have no callers for neutral at this time.
Thank you. Any final statements?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Assemblyman Ken Gray again for the record. Just wanted to thank you guys. I was a little rusty presenting it. It's been a couple years, but you guys were great, and I just really urge you guys to consider passing this one out of committee. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Assemblymember Gray. It's nice to have you testify in our committee. And now I will close the hearing on Assembly Bill 8, and I will open the hearing on Assembly Bill 22, which revises provisions relating to PEB. To present this measure, we have representatives from PEB. Please go ahead whenever you're ready.
Good morning. My name is Celestina Glover. I serve as the Executive Officer for the Public Employees Benefits Program. And today we are presenting AB or Assembly Bill 22. Assembly Bill 22 makes revisions to NRS 287.04345. And what it does is revises the processes that PEB currently goes through to get an RFP and contract approved. First, it makes the executive officer the chief of the using agency versus the board as in current language. This is the same as most other state agencies where the director of that agency is the chief of the using agency. The requirement also changes the number of board members that must participate in the evaluation of RFPs. Currently, the language is permissive, indicating one or more may participate. We're changing our language to say one or more must participate. And then it eliminates the requirement for the board to review the results of the RFP in a closed meeting after the evaluation committee selects the winning vendor. What this does for us is it helps us streamline the process of getting a contract in place for the services that we require. We go to the board in the beginning to ensure that they are approving any RFPs that we request. If the RFP is for something like a third-party administrator or a pharmacy benefits manager, we essentially we have to have that service. So really there isn't a lot of option for them to say no, short of the plan going away and saying that we don't need the service any longer. So those are more informational for the board, but they still go through the approval process. So they're always aware that we've got an RFP getting ready to hit the streets. The only other contracts we may go out for is if we want to add new services. In this case, it typically would affect plan benefit design. That requires board approval in advance of us requesting an RFP or issuing contracts. So the board would still be fully involved in the process of getting an RFP released, and they would be involved in the evaluation of those proposals. The closed session only provides the board an opportunity to discuss the winning vendor's proposal. Unless they were on the evaluation committee, they do not see the other proposals, so they have nothing to compare it to. They can ask questions of the evaluation committee, which typically is made up of members of PEB staff as well as members of the board. And so if those questions can be answered, then that is done at that time. After the closed session, we come out of closed session into an open session, at which time the board can make a decision regarding either approving the RFP results and the contract, They could revise it, they could cancel the RFP altogether. We're asking that we eliminate that. I think the evaluation committee would make those determinations during the evaluation process. If we weren't getting good proposals, then they would come back and say, we don't have a proposal that meets our needs, and we would bring that back to the board to say, we've got to start over. So I think we have our bases covered in that regard. In addition, the executive officer is not part of the evaluation committee. The executive officer only comes into the process when it's time to negotiate terms of the final contract and to sign off on those contracts. So I don't think there is any conflicts or concerns about following the processes. In addition, we would follow NRS 333, again, like every other state agency, to ensure that we are following state purchasing's requirement. We have our contracts and our RFPs approved by our DAG. We also have those RFPs go to GFO, so Governor's Finance Office, and then ultimately onto the schedule for Board of Examiners. So there's a lot of steps in the process to start with. The current steps can delay us getting to Board of Examiners anywhere from 1 to 3 months, depending on if there are questions, if the board wants us to come back. Just last year, we had to have 2 separate board meetings to get through one single contract. So by the time we were able to get to Board of Examiners, we were pushing up against the timeline we need to implement a new vendor. So we're trying to streamline that process and make it a little less onerous compared to the process we have now. And with that, I'll take any questions.
Thank you very much for that presentation. Committee members, do we have any questions? First question is from Assemblymember DeLong.
Thank you, Chair. Maybe I missed it in your presentation. I see you're deleting subsection 4 subsection 5, where the board awards the contracts. So is that, who's now going to award the contracts under this bill?
This is Celestina Glover for the record. So the chief of the using agency, that would be the executive officer, once all the other steps have been gone through and the approval's done. And of course, that would include the approval of the Board of Examiners. Our contracts are fairly large in dollar value, so they're not ones that would not go through that process typically.
Thank you. Our next question is from Assemblymember Jackson.
Thank you, Chair, and good morning. I know the authority switches to the executive officer with the contract proposals. If a majority of the board has an issue with the executive officer decision, can they either, override or kind of have like a vote or decision or say to maybe go over those decisions?
This is Celestina Glover for the record. They have that ability by participating in the evaluation committee, so the contract that would be awarded would be based on the results of that committee, which, as we've said, we want to have the requirement that a board member must participate. Right now, it's may participate. So we want to get their involvement during the evaluation process, because that's when they will see every proposal and they'll have a better idea of what's going on. One thing I didn't mention is we do at every board meeting give our board members an update on the status of all our contracts so that they know what the value of the contract is, when they're due to expire, when we're due to go to bid. And if there are any issues, several of our vendors have to go through quarterly or annual audits. So they're always made aware of what's going on with those.
Thank you. Our next question is from Vice Chair Nguyen.
Thank you, Chair. Just want to put on the record, how often does the board currently meet? And are they volunteers or they are actually full-time with the benefits?
This is Celestina Glover for the record. So the board typically meets in the even-numbered years every other month, so they meet 6 times a year. During the legislative session, we do call some special meetings to discuss pending bills that may affect the program. The board members are essentially our volunteers. They actually apply to be on our board. They're not members of the PEB staff, and they are appointed by the governor. So those members then serve for typically a 4-year term. Many of them continue on beyond that.
So just want to be clear on that. So if they meet, I think every other month is quite frequent. And how often do these contracting process occur throughout a fiscal year?
This is Celestina Glover for the record. So we had a big push back in 2020, 2021 to release an RFP for every single contract. That was somewhere in the neighborhood of 21 RFPs. Because a lot of contracts had been extended and not gone out to bid. Those contracts all came into being between 21 and 22, so we're coming up against those termination dates on those contracts where we will again be pushing to do 10, 15 RFPs pretty much back to back to back. The problem with the meeting schedule is the timing of our board meetings and the timing of the deadlines to meet BOE's agenda timeline. So that oftentimes they don't correlate necessarily, so that could push us a month out or more depending on board action.
Are there any other questions from the committee? I do have one. Has it always been the board that has been making these decisions, or has this before been the chief and then it went to the board and now back to the chief? I just want to see if there's a history on this.
Celestina Glover for the record. Yes, there is a history. Back in 2015, it was changed to the board. The executive officer at the time was the person that signed off on the contracts and went through the process I just described with getting approval for the RFPs and such and update to the board. There was an issue with the board essentially trying to change what the evaluation committee had decided. The discussion was in an open meeting, but typically the proposals provided to us are confidential, and the vendors in question had big issue with that because their competitors were hearing about their product that information they wouldn't typically release to those individuals. So that caused some turmoil, to say the least. So the statute was changed, I believe, in 2015, where the board would hear these in a closed session.
Thank you. I appreciate that history, and we do have a couple of other questions. Assemblyman De Silva?
Thank you, Chair. Just a quick question. Was the board involved in drafting this legislation? Can you give us some history on that? Thank you.
This is Celestina Glover for the record. They were not involved in the drafting. The timing of when we needed to get BDRs to the governor's office and the direction given to us that we needed to keep the BDRs confidential until the governor had determined which ones he was going to move forward with didn't really afford us an opportunity to go to them in advance. We did discuss it after it was released that once we turned in budgets and we were at the in-between agency request and GovRec. And we talked about it at that point. Most of our board members didn't have an issue. I did have 1 or 2 board members asking me how they were going to be involved, and I explained what the new process was going to be. I've had no feedback from them since then, and that was back in, I believe, September.
And next, Assembly Member Flanagan.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Good morning. Thank you for the presentation. I just want to make sure I understand. So you said the board is comprised of people who apply and then are selected to serve. So how exactly is the evaluation committee selected? So if the board is a select group of people, where does this committee come from in terms of their expertise to make these evaluations instead of the board?
This is Celestina Glover for the record. So what typically happens is our contracts manager, which I neglected to introduce, the Chief Financial Officer for PEB, Michelle Whalen, she will work with state purchasing to get the RFPs released, and then we ask for individuals to volunteer to be on the evaluation committee. They're not necessarily experts depending on who it is. They are board members. They know what we're looking for as far as the type of service we need. We also use consultants to help us evaluate whether it's disruption analysis, cost analysis, things of that nature to ensure that what we're picking, one, matches what we've asked for in the RFP itself, and two, is this going to cause more issue than not if we pick a particular vendor?
Thank you. I'll reserve and maybe have some additional conversations. I do have some concerns about how you.
I'm sorry, Assembly Member, is that a
Thank you.
follow-up question? Thank you. There are no other questions. Thank you so much for the presentation. We would like to now move on to testimony. Again, testimony can be provided in person in Carson City, via video conference in Las Vegas, or over the phone, and further instructions for providing testimony can be found on the agenda. Each person providing testimony will have 2 minutes, and first we will hear testimony on AB 22 here in Carson City in support. Seeing no one approaching, seeing no one in Las Vegas, AVH, is there anyone on the line in support?
Chair, the public line is open and working. We have no callers for support at this time.
Thank you. We will now move to hear testimony in opposition to AB 22. Is there anyone in Carson City? Please begin when you're ready.
Good morning, Kent Irvin, ERVIN, Nevada Faculty Alliance, the Independent Association of Professional Employees at our public colleges and universities. A robust program for employee benefits is essential for recruitment and retainment of state employees. The NFA opposes AB 22 in its present form. Prior to 2017, the PEB board was required to evaluate responses to a request for proposals in an open meeting. That conflicted with purchasing rules that normally required confidential evaluation of bids. It allowed vendors to have undue influence and led to appeals of contract awards. SB 502, which the groups at this table were involved in helping put forward in 2017, gave the board an exception from the open meeting law for board members to serve on a confidential evaluation committee following purchasing rules, but retaining the final authority of the board over the awarding of a contract. AB 22 removes all authority of the board over the final award of contracts, regardless of the cost or whether the goals of an RFP were achieved. This is especially problematic for major participant-facing contracts for provider networks and claims payers. Also, recently, requests for proposals or their scope of work have not been presented to the PEB board for input on design prior to being issued, so they don't have full input on the front end either. SB 502 has worked well. PEB was able to conduct those multiple 20-some contract awards within a 1 or 2 year period at that time after the prior executive officer had extended many contracts without competitive bids, and that was found through a legislative audit. If there are timing issues, a special board meeting can always be called for approvals. Along with Senate Bill 32, this bill degrades the ability of the PEB board to fulfill its fiduciary duties. The PEB board was created in 1999 to provide independent oversight. Therefore, we are opposed.
I'm sorry,
Thank you.
Mr. Irvin, timing. Thank you so much.
Yes, good morning, Chair Considine and Co-Chair Nguyen. My name for the record is Terry Laird, Terri-Laird. I'm the Executive Director for the Retired Public Employees of Nevada, RPEN, and I would just like to concur with Dr. Irvin with all of his remarks. We are in opposition to this bill for the very same reasons. Thank you.
Good morning, Chair and members of the committee. For the record, Tess Opferman, that's TESSOPFERMAN, here on behalf of the AFSCME retirees. We understand the frustrations of the onerous timelines this bill seeks to address, and we're sympathetic to this concern. However, we do not feel comfortable with the intent to limit board oversight. The board is appointed to ensure there is oversight over the Public Employees Benefits Program. Including one board member on an evaluation committee is not the same as allowing the whole board to review a proposal. Additionally, the public and our retirees, those who are dependent on PEB, have a right to know final decisions on a proposal in an open meeting setting. We are concerned by the fact that the board did not approve this BDR request, a bill which directly takes oversight away from the board itself, and we are concerned by any legislation that allows major decisions to be made in a secret back room. We are willing to work with the bill sponsor if there's another way to solve some of their timeline issues, but at this point we are opposed to the legislation. Thank you very much.
Good morning, Madam Chair. For the record, Ryan Beeman, representing the professional firefighters in Nevada. Echo the same concerns as the Board of Trustees for the PEBs. They have a fiduciary responsibility to the members of the plan, and I feel like this takes away a lot of their fiduciary, and we are in opposition of this bill.
Thank you. Is there anyone else willing to testify in opposition of AB 22 in Carson City? Seeing none, moving to Las Vegas. Seeing no one in Las Vegas. AVH, is there anyone on the line in opposition?
Chair, the public line is open and working. We have no callers for opposition at this time.
Thank you. Next, we will move on to neutral. Is there anyone in Carson City willing to testify in neutral? Moving to Las Vegas and still seeing no one in Las Vegas, I will move back to AVH. Do we have anyone on the line in neutral?
The public line is open and working. We have no callers for neutral at this time.
Thank you. Would you like to make any final statements? Please go ahead when you're ready.
This is Celestina Glover for the record. I understand the concerns of our stakeholders, our members, and our board. Anytime that PEB makes changes, it is kind of, it makes it maybe even scary to some extent for some individuals are concerned that we're taking authority away from different individuals. What we're trying to do is make it easier for PEB staff to do the job that they need to do and to continue with working with the board. We're not taking oversight away from the board. That isn't our intent. We're just trying to streamline our processes and make the job that we already have to do with a very small staff less onerous, if at all possible. Thank you.
Thank you. And with that, I will close the hearing on AB 22. We will move on to presentations. First, our presentation is from Story County. With us to present is Austin Osborne, County Manager. And please go ahead when you're ready.
Thank you. Chair Member Considine and committees. My name is Austin Osborne and Clay Mitchell, our county commissioners. We're going to present this together. Commissioner Mitchell is going to get us started. And let me get this going. Okay.
Thank you very much. Chair Considine, Vice Chair Wynn, and committee members, thank you so much for allowing us to be here. My name is Clay Mitchell. I am the Vice Chair of the Story County Commission. That's CLAYMITCHELL. And with me is our County Manager, Austin Osborne. We also have our Chair, Jay Carmona, is with us today. He's the one who voluntold me that I was going to be participating in this presentation. And our Government Affairs team is here as well, Silver State and Helen Foley. So thank you for allowing us this opportunity. Now, members, you may notice something funny about this slide, and I wish that I could say that it was we were trying to test that you were awake at this time in the morning, but we do know that we are in the Assembly Government Affairs Committee, the hardest working committee in this building. So, I'm doing a full screen on that. All right. As we get started, I just want to point out that you may see some comparisons with some other numbers from some of our regional partners, and we certainly didn't do this to pick on anyone, but we really wanted to give some scale and acknowledge the regional complexity and interdependence. We got a lot going on. For a small place, we're a county of about 4,300 people split into 4 small residential communities and 1 big industrial community. And so what I'd like to do is just give you a little bit of orientation to the region. So Story County is nested right up against the Reno metro area. In fact, if you turn from the building here and look at nighttime, you'll probably see the lights of the radio towers, and that is the corner of Story County. We put those up just so people could easily identify where we were. And you'll see we're kind of tucked between I-80 on the north and Highway 50 on the south. And we really live in 2 different worlds. My district is down on the south end of the county, and that's where Virginia City is. It's historic. It's arguably the reason that Nevada is a state, sitting on the Comstock lode. And the history is very rich and deep. Up at the other end of the county, as you can see from the pictures at the top, it's cutting edge. And this really is the world that we live in. I'm going to turn it over to County Manager Osborne to take us through some of our fiscal conditions.
Thank you, committee members, Assembly. Thank you. Once again, thank you again. My name's Austin, OSBORNE. I'm the county manager for Story County, and I'm pleased to be here today and appreciate your time letting us be here. So I want to just kind of give us a little bit of a snapshot of where we are fiscally in Story County. And there's going to be a story that goes with this because our county has grown and really morphed itself over the last 20 years to become where it is. So it's not as easy just to say kind of this is where we are and we incrementally change year by year. So our revenues here look a lot like other counties. I mean, they're coming from different revenue sources like property tax, sales tax, et cetera. But when you look at our county, we're a little bit dependent on property tax as well as fees and licenses and building permits, things like that. And that's important because when I get into the next slides, you're going to see where we have to really prepare for upcoming expenditures and things based a little bit on some volatility of permits and fees, and then also noting that we don't really have a lot of commercial uses being a small county, so there's not a lot of C-tax and a lot of sales and use tax generation. The next one, expenses, there's a reason that pie piece fell out of the chart there. But what we have here is really a county that, just like other counties, you see, police, fire, or police and public safety are a major part of our expenditures. Nothing really in this chart that's out of the ordinary when compared to other jurisdictions. But again, what we have in this case, if you look at our expenses, about $21 million, this is out of the general fund. We need to put that other pie piece up there. It's not in the general fund, it's in a payback fund that I'm going to talk about later. But it's important to note that we have about a 20 to 25% of all of these expenses, and our fund has to go to a payback to the Tahoe Reno Industrial Center to pay for infrastructure that I'll explain a little bit later. This slide here has got a story behind it. So I'm going to start with the left and work our way right. Story County in about 1999-2000 lost its sole source of income. That was a proprietor, Joe Conforti, who ran the county's sole source of income, brothels. And as you know some of the history, he had to leave the country and go to Brazil because he had not paid some federal taxes, I understand. And so the problem with that is the county got into a situation where it could not pay its bills. Virginia City Tourism is great, but it really is not a big generator. And the county was going to be considered by the state being carved up and giving up to its neighboring jurisdictions because we couldn't pay the bills. The state was floating us year after year. It's like, you guys can't sustain yourselves. So what happened at this time is some interesting things came together. We had some leadership and vision internally amongst our team, and Roger Norman happened to come into town at the same time. And the two put together an idea to build an industrial park in the desert out east of the Reno Sparks area, and created a development agreement. It created a plan. And at the time, the county was actually laughed at. We were kind of made fun of. They're like, that will never happen. Nobody will ever build out in the desert. And very shortly after, Mars Calcan became our flamingo in the desert. And USA Parkways, it was built, became our Tropicana Boulevard. So I know folks from Clark County definitely know a vision about somebody who was laughed at for a dream, building something in the desert. So you see that these numbers grow over time, and you know, we're not super wealthy, we're doing okay, but there's some things we need to explain in this slide. If you look at our expenses versus our tax revenue, they're running pretty close to each other. We depend again a lot on those permit fees and some other revenues that come in to make that gap filled. But that end fund balance needs to be explained, because some people look at that and say, wow, my gosh, what's all that about? It's $40 million. And it is significant. But we have had a past where we've had layoffs in our past, we have had bankruptcy in our past. We were very conservative in our spending over the time in order to build up money necessary in order for us now we're comfortable to put into capital improvements. And capital improvements in our county include replacing critical infrastructure like water and sewer that was built right after the Civil War. And it hasn't been replaced since the Civil War. And this is our only source. We'll talk about, you know, in future slides here where we have. So that money you're going to see in the next year drop down significantly as we're making those investments. And that payback, if you remember that prior slide, this year alone we had to make $5.7 million payment to the Tahoe Reno Industrial Center out of that pie piece that you saw earlier slide. And I'll explain why in a bit. Just keep remembering that as we go along. So this is really a slide about scale, and Commissioner Mitchell made a point. We're going to point to Washoe County, Reno Sparks area a lot because we're right next to them. They're a major metropolitan area, and it's an area we can use as scale. And we'll talk about other counties too in the slides. But there was some questions about Tesla Gigafactory. We probably all know there happens to be one of those in our county. Oh, there's two of them in our county. And then we also have a major battery lithium processing facility in our county as well. And so those revenues from Tesla for the first Gigafactory were due this year. And we've been watching those revenues since July. And we're finding that really there was some estimates we're going to get $30–50 million. We never thought that was the case. We thought it'd be about 15, 17, and we're meeting those targets. So in Story County, that's a lot of money. That fills that gap that we necessary to pay for that infrastructure that we're talking about. But in scale, if you were to compare that to the budgets of our neighboring jurisdictions, it's kind of a drop in the bucket for something of their scale. And to us, it's very significant. So Story County is Nevada's leader in tax abatements. We have $1 billion worth of abatements that have occurred in Story County. That's whether it's the Tesla Gigafactory, Redwood Materials, as well as the other abatement companies that get the off-the-shelfers and those sorts of things. And we're not against that. We're okay with that. It's worked out. There's some adjustments we're going to talk about later we might want to propose. But it's important to know that Story County, this tiny little county of 160 staff, really you're dealing with management right here at this table. It's about it. Is we're able to manage the scale of these companies coming in and all these abatements. So I want to talk a little bit about sustainability with the size we are. It's very important that we as a small county balance our staffing versus our professional services contracts in order to get things done. We were at a time when we had to do layoffs, and it took a decade for us to recover from that, and we don't want that to happen again. So these services you see on that right slide are things that we contract with qualified professionals that can provide those services, and then when a project's done, they can go away. We don't have to worry about just keeping staff on and keep growing and becoming bureaucratic. On the left side with staffing though, 162 people is not a lot of folks. That includes our sheriff's office, all those folks. There's not a lot of administration here. And we're dealing with the same challenges that everyone else is. Salaries, union bargaining, we're dealing with inflation, we're dealing with insurance costs that are out of control and growing every year. And what's hard for us sometimes is we're butted right up against one jurisdiction that's a city and then other jurisdictions that are rural and growing. And when we're collective bargaining and we're doing our comp studies for staff and those sorts of things, it's hard for us because we have to try to be competitive with salaries that far exceed what we have in our county, especially in the management area on the urban side. Yet we're trying to lean on the rural side to be kind of comparable and fair to the taxpayers of the county. And that's what really makes things different or difficult. And then we get poaching all the time. And we're not the only county in the region, but we can't meet the salaries that exist to our nearest jurisdiction. And we end up losing staff, especially once they get that certification. Water and sewer, absolutely a huge problem for us. Management, it's a problem, and even other positions. So I'm going to talk a little bit about our capital improvements here. Let's talk about Tri-Center. So the Tahoe Reno Industrial Center has a development agreement for 50 years, starting in 2000. All these things that you see in this slide are roads, infrastructure, and they are drainages. And most developers, they build a park or they build a housing development, then they dedicate the roads to the county maintains them, which is a good deal. In this case, we actually have to pay that back and continue to maintain it. And in this case, right now, we have $48 million worth of infrastructure that's been put in the industrial center. We've been making payments on it. You remember that slide earlier, there was a $6 million one made. $26 million is left. And so that means all that stuff, we have to keep making a mortgage payment in addition to our other expenses. What's equally important, if not more, is a master plan that you see in front of you that's embedded in that contract. And what it says is every company that comes to Story County, when they put a road or a drainage in, if it's in that plan, they put it in and they give it to us and they have to get paid back. There is $85 million more of anticipated infrastructure out at the park that we are going to have to take on over time and pay that back. It's not a bad deal for us. It's interest-free. It got us started. We wouldn't be here as a county today without this deal. But it's important to note when you look at that huge end fund balance and that gap, what are they doing with that money? Well, we have to anticipate these expenditures while we're working. It's a different dynamic than a lot of different jurisdictions have. So just a snapshot here, USA Parkway, if you're not familiar with the area, that's Interstate 80 going from left to right. The USA Parkway interchange, which is actually most of it not in our county, this is part of what we owe money on. And we also owe money on USA Parkway, still owe the cash on that and have to pay that, but we don't even own the road. It's an NDOT road on a portion of it and then an NDOT maintenance agreement on the other. And then, of course, fire stations and other infrastructure too. So when you look at the capital improvement plan on what we're looking at having to do, there's lots of things we would like. But our key thing has risen to the top. We have a jail in Virginia City that was built in the 90s, and it is literally, without exaggerating, sinking into the ground. It wasn't built right. It wasn't, no ground preparation was done. They just threw it on the dirt. And so it's tearing itself apart. And I'd love to give some wonderful stories here about what's happening in that building, but for security reasons, probably not ideal. But this building has to be replaced. I don't want to replace a jail. That's not the most exciting project in the world. But this is a $25 million project that Story County is going to have to potentially pay right out of its fund if we can't get federal appropriations to cover at least half of it. We're working very hard on that. Down at the bottom, this is the Tahoe Reno Industrial Center. Our sheriff's office is building a substation there as well. It's a $1 million project. And in addition to that, we provide the state of Nevada at no cost their Nevada Highway Patrol. We provide deeders with their Employ Nevada, and they also have the State of Nevada Health Department down there at no cost. We provide space to them so they can operate out at the center. So roads is a big one in our county. I'll talk about the top one. This is a $5 million project that we just finished serving 1,600 people. We're a very spread out county like a lot of Nevada, so we have these problems just like the rest of us. The middle road is an example of a road. This one's going to Redwood Materials. They build the road, they do it to our standards, they dedicate to us, we have to pay it back. We don't know the number on that yet, but we're expecting between $4 and $6 million that will go on to that tri-debt that I talked about just a moment ago. The bottom road is Electric Avenue, serving Tesla and about a dozen other companies. We had to put a $4 million improvement to rehab that road this year. We do want to thank Tesla, though. They negotiated a fair agreement with us where they paid for 67% of the rehabilitation of that, totally related to their use of, it was a very fair agreement. They also are paying for 85% of a traffic signal that is going to go into that area. So Lockwood, like many of us, we have community centers. Commissioner Mitchell talked about how we're bifurcated between a mountain range, and we have the new and the old on two different parts of the county. At the north end on I-80, we have Lockwood. This is a community center we have to build to provide indigent and other services down there, everything from senior food closet, social services, and we also provide the school district all their free, cooked lunches out of that building, or will. Water system upgrades I talked about. That blowout that you see is a Silver City water line providing water to Silver City, Lyon County. We are their water jurisdiction. That line there is about as tall as the ceiling here, that blowout. These happen commonly, very frequently in the wintertime, usually scheduled around holidays and weekends. That is not an exaggeration, but the system is 100 years old or older and needs to be replaced. There's $61 million worth of critical infrastructure that we need to provide service to, what you see here, the Virginia City, Gold Hill, Silver City, Comstock area. We do not have wells. There's no water under us that's potable or able to drink. The mines from the 1800s drained it. And so this is it. You take water from almost by Lake Tahoe, just like siphoning gas out of a tank of a gas tank. That water goes underneath 580 when you come in from Reno and back up at 800 pounds per square inch. And it siphons its way to Virginia City. That's our only source of water. We have to replace that siphon. It's called the Lead Siphon Project. We're getting federal appropriations for it. That's a $20 million rough project. We're gonna have to likely pay for roughly about half of that, give or take. And we're working on that. And there's some other projects here that you see that are part of that. That line that you see on the right, that's the B Street water line. That's a main and town. All of our ARPA funding, our ARPA funds went into that hole. That was $800,000. That's all really Story County got out of the ARPA funds, but we put 100% of it into that water line. Flood mitigation, like all of us, we are working with our regional partners. We really appreciate the folks at Washoe County for helping out. Carson Water Subconservancy on the south side, and NDOT's also involved with us in water planning and flood mitigation. We've been working with broadband, bringing broadband, like Commissioner Mitchell said, you have AI running the planet at the north end of the county, and we are finally getting out of the DSL world in Virginia City. And so we have broadband coming up thanks to partnerships with Google, Rural Innovation Strategies, Churchill County that provided telegraph to us in the 1800s. Go for them. And Story and even Lyon counties. We're also providing at no cost broadband services to the Silver City area in Lyon County, meaning the infrastructure itself. Ratepayers will still have to pay for that. These are just, again, highlights of critical infrastructure that we have in our county that need to be done. These are the main things I've already talked about. There's some other things in additionally, they're probably more exciting, like the courthouse where all of our county administrative offices work, got modern electricity 3 years ago. We're very excited about that, and that really is a reality. And then we have a fire station at the north end of the county that is actually partially made out of garbage reclaimed out of the Lockwood landfill. That is a project that we would like to replace with a little bit better facility in the future. Some folks do ask us, are you guys going, for federal appropriations and grants? My team is awesome in this world. I bet would rival any other county. These are projects right now listed that we do in trying to get grant funding to help offset these things. So we're very busy there as well. I'm going to pass it over to Commissioner Mitchell to talk a little bit about the region. Thank you.
Clay Mitchell, Story County for the record. So I want to point out this lower image here is a fairly well-known one. It's showing the Tahoe Reno Industrial Center. And again, talking about scale, that yellow outline is about 104,000 acres, or roughly 40% of the land mass of our county. This was certainly good for marketing. And technically, that land is all owned by TRI participants. But in understanding the scale, we got to realize that only about a third of that is really developable. A lot of it is really mountainous, but it was used to show to the world that we had the biggest industrial park in the world. In fact, it kind of looks like Pac-Man about to eat Reno and Sparks, and To put into context where the core of the development has happened, the white shaded area is really the core of where development has happened. We have over 150 companies that are there in that area. So we're significant, but we're certainly not the only game in town. And this slide shows that as well. This is just representing new business licenses that have been issued recently. And while we certainly have growth happening, you can see proportional, again, significant, but not the only game in town. I want to talk briefly about just some of the benefits that are coming out of the first Gigafactory. Tesla's Gigafactory, it's about 5 million square feet under roof. It's between 10 and 12,000 people working out of one building. It is a massive project. And this just shares some of the benefits that have come to the region and the state from that. We see 117 million in revenues coming to the local governments. We see $58 million in taxes coming into the region. I'll come back to the third one because that's important. But over the last, this is over from 2015 to 2022, about 7 years, we've seen significant increases in median income, per capita income, assessed valuations, taxable sales throughout. I want to go back to the third item on there, which is our school district runs on a budget of, let's call it $11 million a year, but the revenue that is generated for the schools exceeds that by at least $5 million a year. And so that money returns to the state to be distributed according to the funding formula. We expect that to continue to increase. And certainly with only 450 kids, our per pupil amount, we don't have an economy of scale, and so it's going to be a lot, but we have a good education system, but we are able to contribute back into the broader picture because of the economic success that we've seen. Again, this is just to give an idea of scale. This is the 7 years before the Gigafactory was built and the 7 years after, and we're looking at Washoe County's budget. Now, certainly, there's some macro picture things at play, but the economic activity that flowed into the region juiced the recovery that happened as we were coming out of the Great Recession. Now, as a result of being the leader in abatements in Nevada, we tend to look at ourselves as a form of local expert in that regard. And as a result, the bill that we are presenting this session has to do with local participation in abatements, specifically, narrowly focused almost exclusively on the $1 billion and $3.5 billion abatement projects. Those are the categories that have the biggest impact. And so we're asking for the opportunity for cities and counties to be notified earlier, to be a greater partner in that process. There also seems to be a slight oversight in the original legislation that did not allow fire districts to have a seat at the table, and they have to provide services from day one when these big projects come in. And so we will be asking that they be included, as well as several other small challenges that have surfaced as we've gone through the abatement process, and we'll be happy to talk about that more as our legislation comes forward. This is just an example of some of the regional initiatives that we participate in, and I'll just point out that the highlighted ones are our primary focus, or active projects that we're working on right now with our neighbors. We're grateful for our neighbors on all sides. It really wouldn't work if we didn't work regionally with them. I want to point out one example of regional cooperation, and that's this effluent pipeline. A few years back, the ratepayers of Reno, Sparks, and Washoe, they were facing a challenge. Their sewer treatment plant was exceeding nitrate levels released with their effluent into the Truckee River. And they were looking at potentially $150 million upgrade to that plant to meet the EPA guidelines. Washoe County's under EPA guidelines, not just NDEP. And so smarter heads than me put their heads together and came up with an idea to reroute that treated effluent, instead of putting it directly back into the river, to reroute it into the industrial center. Now, the developers of the industrial center had some foresight, and they plumbed the park with both freshwater lines and purple pipe to handle treated effluent. And the thought was that we could replace freshwater that was being used with this treated effluent for process uses and cooling. And so this really is an example, a poster child for regional cooperation. We're now taking that water into the park, and in exchange, both the GID that we have in the park that delivers water and NDOT donated good water that could be replaced into the river to make sure that downstream users were made whole and that those flows continued as they needed to. The way that this was funded was through the pipeline was funded through private funds from the end users of this water, but then that will be paid back through future tax revenues into Story County, very similar to our model on a lot of other things through a tax increment area. So we feel like with this, everyone won. Everyone benefited. The environment, workforce, we were able to allow continued growth through that additional water that was available. All of the affected cities, counties, and particularly the tribe, who's the recipient of this water down at the end with better water quality. Transportation is certainly a big issue. We're currently supporting and giving input into a study that's being done by NDOT about widening I-80. It goes through a very narrow canyon along with railroad tracks and the river. And when there's an accident or an incident there, it's tough to get the people, the 17,000 or so people that work out in the park there on a daily basis.
Thank you. Just want to take a quick pause. I know we're over 20 minutes on your presentation. We look like we're about halfway through your presentation, so I don't know if you could.
Absolutely. I'll wrap up on mine. I just want to point out very simply that Story County works very closely with our neighbors, with our fire district as well, which is a separate governmental body, but we are the board of the fire district. Thank you.
Committee Chair, I do believe I can land us into the rest of the presentation within a reasonable period of time to talk about our housing plan.
Please state your name for the record again. Thank
Okay,
you.
Austin Osborne for the record, County Manager. I appreciate your time and thank you for your understanding. All right, I'll go through these a little bit quicker than originally expected. So just in a little bit about our housing plan and some updates to the master plan. There's an argument that there's nowhere to build houses in the region because of constraints that are similar to what you see in southern Nevada. We argue that we do have areas in our county to build. Our county commissioners recently updated the Story County master plan to accommodate additional housing and also to deregulate codes. So I'm not going to talk much about that, but I am going to talk about this. We're not allowed to build houses in the Tahoe Reno Industrial Center by covenant contract, and we're not allowed to build houses up at the right slide because it's a garbage dump. But these are major areas in the county that otherwise would be slated for residential, so we had to look at alternatives. And here's the alternatives. Tri-Center, you see right in the center of the county. We looked at what would be within reasonable driving distance of Tri to build residences, and those are the key areas we have to build. This is just a general slide of areas where people live. So we looked at the topography as well, and they came up with some areas that we might be able to build. In Lockwood along Interstate 80, this is a slide. That area is not in our county. We did reach the partners to try to potentially look at some residential growth there. We believe there's future potential here. The parties weren't quite able to meet necessary amount of things that need to be done in the short timeline. So we'll revisit that area as a potential area for future growth in Lockwood. A main area for Story County adjacent to Tri-Center, about 15 minutes, is Painted Rock. In 2006, this area was approved by the county commissioners for a planned unit development of approximately 3,600 homes. 2008 happened. We all know what happened then. And so at that point in 2021, the owners of the property came back with a proposal to build a smart city, a very large urban area there, and Story County and the master plan completely support that even to this day. Another area we looked at most recently in the 2024 update is a 40-minute drive from Tahoe Reno Industrial Center instead of I-80 and all the congestion we have there. Get them south on the Highway 50 and USA Parkway to the Dayton area. And this is an area here that looks like this. It's about 2,500 acres, 10,000 homes potentially. It would be about 26,000 people, roughly the number of employees that are out at Tri-Center. We think it would resolve a problem. And the highway you see here is an important picture because NDOT has developed a wonderful divided, almost freeway between Tri-Center and this area that is very well suited for the growth that we would have in there for residential development. American Flat is an area that's potential. I'm not going to say it's in the master plan ready to go. This is south of Virginia City, but it's a potential area that could be planned unit development. One thing that's a benefit here, it's within the Marlette water system, and it does have water availability. Story County is more affordable place to live. Part of it is I'm proud to work for county commissioners, that every time we do an update to the codes, we're deregulating, making things simple, allowing people to do more things, not less. And the master plan did the same exact thing. We allow tiny houses, zero setback, mixed use, high density, making things easy for developers to build. We're also talking with regional folks, developers, UNR, Nevada Rural Housing, and others about learning how to make residential development easier and better. We want to change that word from affordable. We know the reality is attainable. We're not going to be able to get affordable housing as it's actually defined, and we recognize that's going to be a challenge for Nevada, but we're trying to make attainable workforce housing, increase the inventory, and reduce the cost. We are famous for a 7-day grading permit and a 30-day building permit. That would apply in these cases as well. And in coming together, this really is, why does our region do really well? They generate a lot of seat tax. They generate money from commercial uses, people where they buy their Fords and Chevys and go to the movies and do their things. That generates revenue. It's done through a mixed-use community. We did a study in our regional area to show, does residential pay for itself when you look at the entire picture? And it does, and we're trying to mimic this model. We do allow extended stay uses out at the Tahoe Reno Industrial Center, is about 650 units. These apartments here have pots and pans and things like that in them. People do have to play musical chairs after 48 days to meet the requirements of being a motel hotel versus an apartment, because it's tri-center restricted. And we have a 150 space RV park as well. This is all workforce housing for people that are here for short periods of time. And then lastly, I'm gonna come in for just basically as a recap. Tahoe Reno Industrial Center is a place for heavy industrial uses. This is not a business park. That's why we don't allow residences at the park, but we do adjacent to it. There is a development agreement that locks in those uses and those fees and the zoning and everything for these companies. And the reason it works for us, even though we're probably losing a little opportunity financially, is these companies know in the future they can grow and expand, and they know what that environment is going to be like 30 years from now when Clay and I and our team are long gone. This is our organizational chart in the development world. Everybody comes together, they do plan review concurrently, they do it electronically and get people out the door. They don't hold up companies. And then here's how you communicate with us. We give our cell phones out to everybody. You reach us, you reach a department head, myself, a county commissioner. We go into SEAL Team 6 immediately, land a company, address an issue, and this treatment happens whether it's Tesla or Walmart or somebody building a garage in their backyard. We do have more information that can go on and on. There's a short executive summary that's available, as well as a very deep paper representing that executive summary with all the data, and you can scan that little thing for the big paper if you would like. We really appreciate your time letting us speak today. Thank you.
Thank you so much, and I know there was a lot of information, so thank you for getting through it. Committee members, do we have questions? I will start with Committee Assembly Member DeLong.
Thank you, Chair. Quick question about the siphon. What's the schedule for replacing that, and is there going to have to be a shutdown of the siphon and an effect to water supply in completing that project?
Thank you. Austin Osborne for the record. I'd be happy to answer that question. Yes, we're expecting that siphon when we get the federal appropriations. That should begin between the next 1 and 4 years, depending on where things land. The engineering is the first stage, and there will have to be a phase-in where there'll have to be a short shut-off period, but we are prepared with our Public Works Department, as well as collaboration with the state on its side of the siphon, to be able to work around that, as well as with fire flows, as well as municipal flows.
Thank you. Our next question is from Assembly Member Jackson.
Thank you, Chair. It's very exciting to hear about all the development that's going on, especially the mixed-use development, workforce development. I have one question. Where does the fire funds come from out of the budget?
Thank you, Assembly Member Clay Mitchell, Story County, for the record. It's a great question. So the primary funding source for our fire district is property taxes. They do have some other revenue sources. For example, when they're called out to go fight a forest fire in California, that is reimbursed. We have a couple of bulldozers that come in very useful in those situations. And so certainly there is some reimbursement that happens when they go fight in other places, but almost all of it comes out of property taxes, as does a large chunk of school funding, and then a portion goes to the county and a very small portion of property taxes goes to the state.
Thank you. I have a couple of questions. So one of them is, you showed a slide with the America's Parkway interchange and said that part of that parkway is in Story County and part of it is in another county, but you are responsible for paying back for the building of that portion. Are the other counties where any of these improvements have been made, are they responsible for paying for those, or are those just a Story County thing?
Austin Osborne for the record. The interchange on USA Parkway to I-80, that really was part of development of Tahoe Reno Industrial Center. So Story County did bear the full cost of that, as it should have. This was not a project that really was, at the time, related to another jurisdiction.
So then the parts that are in part of Story County, it's still part of TRIC?
Austin Osborne for the record. I think I heard you correctly. Correct me if I didn't. That interchange serves Tahoe Reno Industrial Center. It's actually in Washoe County. It's not in our county, but it's right next to our county. And it exclusively serves Tri-Center. And so that was Story County's responsibility. That interchange is not within the boundaries of the Tahoe Reno Industrial Center, if that's what you're asking, but it is within the responsibility of payback. I hope I answered your question.
Yes, thank you. That did answer it. And then trying to figure out how to ask this one, because I know that there's been $1 billion in abatements now that time has passed. Now some of those taxes are now coming into Story County. On the one hand, I can see, you're talking about how the benefits and how this will work out, but you're also saying at the same time that your infrastructure was built at the Civil War era and you're trying to fix that. Is the Story County plan as these abatements end, or you have more say in those abatements, that you will be able to pay for the infrastructure that you are planning out of that, or is that too far down the road?
Thank you for the question, Austin Osborne, for the record. I think I'll answer your question correctly. So when Tesla came to town and this abatement program was put together, we're in support of that. It was an investment, and we endured 10 years of no revenues coming into the county from that use. But at this point, we're getting roughly about $15, $17 million, depending on where it lands at the end of the year. And that money is going to enable us to be able to circulate back into that infrastructure that's needed. If we wouldn't have approved that use in 2015 or 14, we wouldn't have that investment capability today to be able to do that. So it really was an investment for future opportunity that worked out. I think that does answer your question, and it is part of the money that we're going to use in reinvesting back into whether it's, all the infrastructure that's needed across the county.
Yes, that does answer my question, but I just want to be clear that you're saying you're getting 15.7 million, but about a third of that is being paid back. So you're not really having that amount of money, you're having less than that, when you're right, years ago, it was you're going to get 20 million, 30 million, that's been halved, and now from what you are getting, a third of that is having to go back.
I'm glad you asked that question, Austin Osborne, for the record. You're absolutely right. So how it's set up is for all of the money that is generated, all the tax revenue that's generated out of the Tahoe Reno Industrial Center, and that's taxes, it's fees, it's franchise fees, anything that happens in those boundaries comes to the county. The net, we have to pay to Tahoe Reno Industrial Center or the developer 35 cents on the dollar for everything that's made. So you're absolutely right. When that Tesla money comes in and it rises all that tide, that also increases the amount that year that we have to pay back, and every year thereafter as that revenue grows. So that is absolutely a correct statement, that out of the $15 million that we're talking about, a portion of that is going to have to go back to that mortgage payment.
Chair, if I may, Clay Mitchell for the record. So just to clarify on the Tesla abatements, the property taxes have started to flow as have, if I understand correctly, the modified business taxes. That's nothing that we have anything to do. That goes to the state. Those were on 10-year timeframes. The sales tax abatement is a 20-year timeframe on those top-level abatements. And so we won't see anything from that, and neither will the state for an additional 10 years. As we're looking at our planning, and it is a moving target, but we look at about 15 million as a net number that we expect to receive on the property tax side. In other words, maybe slightly more, offset by what needs to go into the payback. And so for our planning purposes, we think that 15 million, 12 to 15 million is somewhere where we'll land on what we can actually use from those unabated taxes that are coming in now. I do want to point out one last thing, and that is a large portion of the property taxes are on personal property, and those depreciate fairly quickly. And so our look is that over time, while there will be some replacement on that equipment, that will actually decrease over time, whereas the other elements, the sales tax and the modified business tax, should increase because those are more keyed indexed to inflation or what have you, whereas the property tax portion probably will settle down to a level and then level out in another 10 years.
But at least on this one abatement that we're talking about, you still have 10 more years before you see any sales tax.
Clay Mitchell, for the record, that is correct. Sales tax, our budget is heavily oriented towards property tax, and so it's not as big a portion for us. But certainly that's part of the arrangement with the $3.5 billion abatement.
Thank you for that. It's just we've been seeing presentations from other counties, and other counties, it's not property tax, it's sales tax, so this is a very different view of it. Committee members, any other questions? Okay, thank you so much for that presentation. We will move on to the next presentation, which is the City of Fernley. With us to present are Mayor Neil E. McIntyre, Albert Torres, Council Member, Ward 4, and Benjamin Marchant, City Manager. Please go ahead when you're ready.
Good morning, Madam Chair, and members of the Government Affairs Committee. For the record, I'm Mindy Elliott with Flynn Judici Government Affairs, and it's my pleasure to introduce one of my clients, the City of Fernley. And with me today is Mayor Neil McIntyre and the City Manager, Ben Marchant. We also have with us Councilman Torres is in the audience as well. He's over there waving. So with that, we did get the memo, and we know to keep this at 15 minutes at the max. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Good morning, Chair Constantine and members of the Government Affairs Committee. I'm Neil E. McIntyre, Neil, N-E-A-L, McIntyre, M-C, capital I-N, T-Y-R-E. I am the mayor of Fernley and have been the mayor since December 7th of 2022. I want to tell you a little bit about my background, and I've been in Fernley for 65 of my 68 or 69 years. I had a birthday yesterday, so 69 now. I have been, like I say, in Fernley for 65 years. I married my childhood sweetheart, the girl next door, literally the girl next door. We have been married for 49 years in June, which my wife Victoria is here today. We have 5 children, 25 grandkids, and 8 grandkids, all of which live in the city of Fernley, except for a couple adult grandchildren that have moved away. Fernley is so I've been involved with Fernley my whole life, from coaching Little League all the way up to coaching high school sports. So Fernley is really near and dear to my heart. So having served the community as a coach for children, I've also served on the Lyon County School Board of Trustees for 14 years. And after I was term limited with the school board, I then ran for mayor, and I've been the mayor for 2 years, and I absolutely love it. So having said that, I will now introduce our council, who, up on the board there, we have Councilman Hannon. Then we have, he is in Ward 1, Councilwoman Zoberski, Councilman Lau, Councilman Albert Torres, who is here and also with the Nevada League of Cities, and then our new councilman, Joe Mendoza. These are exciting times for us here in Fernley, and to tell you more about the city of Fernley with this presentation is our city manager, Benjamin Marchant.
Thank you. Good morning. Benjamin Marchant, City Manager of Fernley, for the record, BenjaminMarchant. The city of Fernley has a rather tremendous story. I started my position in September of 2023, and what is most impressive about Fernley is the growth. The city of Fernley incorporated as a city in 2001 with a population of 8,500 people and has now tripled in size to 2025 at 25,332. In the last 4 years, the city of Fernley was the third fastest growing city in Nevada with a growth rate of 8.3% after Mesquite and Henderson, or rather not Henderson, but North Las Vegas. Thank you. And we're projecting to grow even more up to by 20,000 over the next 15 to 20 years. And that is a very exciting opportunity for a city of Fernley to see so much change in such a short period of time. The city's budget is distinctive from the other cities in the state. Similar to Story County, the city largely relies on property taxes for 29.5% of its budget. Licenses, permits, and fees are 27.25% of its budget. That reflects the growth impact that allows us to pay for our annual budget expenses. This year, we are expending $7.5 million in motor fuel tax funds that have been accumulated over time through the Regional Transportation Commission. That's going to be 42% of our budget this year, but those funds will be depleted and need to be rebuilt over time. But this is allowing the city to move forward. When it comes to C-Tax, it's less than 2% of our budget. It funds our parks program going back to the 80s, and otherwise the city does not receive any C-Tax for a significant share of its budget. But on the expenditure side, 50% of our budget is for general fund operations, and we are expending $4 million of our accrued reserves for our Community Response and Resource Center project, and there's the streets capital improvements for $7.5 million. I will note that the city of Fernley does not provide law enforcement or public safety services. Those are provided by Lyon County Sheriff's Office and the North Lyon County Fire Protection District. So over the years, although the city does not receive C-Tax, it also doesn't provide those services. So it's a wash, and the city's doing just fine. City of Fernley is one of the leanest running municipalities in the state of Nevada at 3.5 employees per 1,000. We have 88 employees providing services in water, wastewater treatment, streets, parks, facilities, development through planning, engineering, and building, animal services, and the normal administration for finance, clerk, legal, and management. Fernley has a strong economic base. We have some wonderful companies that have invested in Fernley over the years. Listed on this slide. We're very proud of our community partners and the investments they've made, and they are the source of jobs as the city of Fernley has migrated from an agricultural, historical, traditional economy to a more industrial base. Economic development is driving growth in Fernley. The Victory Logistics Park is over 2,000 acres for industrial development, and Mark IV Capital is the developer of that area, and they have a really big announcement coming on February 28th, next week. We have Governor Lombardo, Congressman Amedee, and other dignitaries that will be there for that event. We invite everyone to come to hear the big news. And Bear Paw opened a 500,000 square foot facility last summer and more manufacturing is coming. And with those jobs, we're attracting employees and a demand for housing. The city of Fernley has over 3,400 housing units now approved for development. We have over 700 units under construction, and we are ready to receive many more residents. As my counterpart in Story County, County Manager Austin Osborne mentioned, affordable housing is a difficult target to hit, but attainable housing is going to be achieved through more supply. Right now, we have a high demand with low supply, and as we build these houses, we'll be able to make it more attainable for employees. Last year, we saw 276 new businesses open in Fernley. That's a 17.5% increase, bringing our total businesses from 1,500 to 1,800. And we're very proud of these businesses opening because this is providing the amenities and services that our residents are looking for. Fernley is in a inconvenient position, being less than 30 miles away from Fallon and the Reno-Sparks area. We're just a couple miles too shy to get our own hospital, which is becoming a big issue as the population grows, and we need medical services. But every new opportunity that opens, so that residents don't have to commute the 30 miles to go shopping and enjoy restaurants, we're open for business and welcoming them to come to Fernley now. Coming in 2025 this year, Tractor Supply, Panda Express, new tenant spaces at the Meadows at Inglewood, and Vaquero Storage are all in construction and planning to be opened this year. The really exciting part now is the growth of the community. Right now, the developed area of Fernley is about 20 square miles or so. The city, when it incorporated, has a boundary area of 168 square miles, exceeding that of the cities of Las Vegas and other large cities in the state. In expansion, this year, we just completed the North Fernley Area Plan. This is a 6,000 acres north of I-80, and that is planned for development, and we are in the process of completing the Southwest Area Plan, which will open another 11,000 acres for development on the west side of 95A and south of the Truckee Irrigation Canal. We are in the process of constructing the Community Response and Resource Center. Phase 1 is the primary operations center with a commercial kitchen and meeting space. It is intended, while it's not being used for emergencies, to be operated by the Truckee Meadows Boys and Girls Club. And we have a bill, SB 70, to fund the completion of this facility to meet the growth, services, and emergency response capacity for the community. Phase 2 is an early childhood learning center. Right now, we have a severe lack of childcare services in our community. There's a wait list of over 1,000 students. This phase 2 would allow 80 more children to be served. And then phase 3 would be into gymnasium sheltering center. And so that is what SB 70 is we're looking for funding for. Not asking for C-Tax, just a little help. More community investments going on in the community. The Lyon County Justice Court is receiving an $8 million expansion, and we are moving forward with the Nevada Pacific Parkway extension at exit 50. This extension is a $47 million project that will build a bridge over the Union Pacific Railroad to connect Highway I-80 to Highway 50. And we also did receive a raise or build grant in the amount of $25 million. This week, all work by the Federal Highway Authority has been stopped on that project, so we're wondering how to move forward. And our partnership with Mark IV Capital, they have expressed their intention with or without the grant, they will go forward and we will get this done. This will be turned over to the city for ownership, and I don't advise that the city hold on to a bridge over a railroad or a major highway interconnect. So we're in talks with Nevada Department of Transportation to take that over. They have another road in town that they would like us to take over, Farm District Road, since that was the main thoroughfare before Highway 50 got built. And so the city would be happy to make that change, that swap, after all the investments meet each other's standards. So traffic is one of the major issues for Fernley. Transportation and traffic management has exacerbated the patience of residents and commuters alike between Fallon and Reno. One of the biggest choke points is the roundabout on Highway 50A at exit 48. It's highly congested during peak hours. It's kind of amusing. A lot of people talk about the value of building walkable communities, and it's not really customary for most of my fellow Americans to walk as much as I do. But I enjoy a walk to work. It's about 1.5 miles. And there have been a couple of times in the last year where the roundabout was so far backed up that even though Mr. Mayor and other staff members left in their vehicles before me, I walked past them in the queue and made it home before them. So that is a problem that the community is facing, but the City of Fernley has partnered with Nevada Department of Transportation to conduct corridor studies of these 3 areas from exit 46 to 48 on Highway 50 through the roundabout, Farm District Road, and the southbound direction from Main Street on Highway 95A to the south of town. This will identify the safety concerns at the intersections of Main Street and Cottonwood Drive, as well as any other issues, lack of sidewalks and safe routes to schools in these neighborhood areas. Growth constraints affect Fernley as well because the checkerboarding of federal lands across the town. The 2013 lands bill has slated 9,779 acres to be conveyed to the city of Fernley. The Fernley began with the first 8 parcels of that request in 2019. A year and a half ago when I started, the Bureau of Land Management had indicated that they intended to convey those parcels by December of 2023 and then 2024, and here we are. They say that we're now 1 to 4 weeks away from having that conveyance, but that's what they say every week, so that keeps getting pushed out. But getting these parcels conveyed to the city will allow us to then plan for growth and development in the future. We also have the 2023 lands bill that was introduced in the last session. It didn't move forward, but it has been reintroduced in this session by Congressman Amadei, and this would add another 12,000 acres in the southwest area. And we are getting developers and people coming around regularly looking for how they can invest in Fernley. There's a great need for growth as the Washoe Valley has reached build out, and Fernley is open ground for more development. We have the water, we have the utilities, except when it comes to data centers, we need power, but we are working closely with NV Energy and our partners to get those needs met as well. Lastly, I'd like to touch on the revenue limitations for the city of Fernley. As you saw, property taxes are a major source of revenue. However, due to legislative restrictions and on tax rates and the caps, the $100 million increase in assessed value last year will result in roughly a $250,000 increase to our tax base. We've identified a need for at least 5 new positions, and that increase will only cover less than half of that. And so in order to meet the growing needs of our population, we need to find other revenue models to solve that problem. It limits our ability to provide services as more and more people move to Fernley. There was a economic forum last week held by EDON, the Economic Development Authority of Western Nevada, and in that they showed that while a lot of people are moving here from California, that only amounts to 30% of our growth. The rest of the growth is, other 70% is coming from all the other states. And as I've looked around at the license plates around Fernley, they are from all the other states, from Alaska to Florida, New York to Arizona. So the City of Fernley does support Assemblymember Anderson's bill, AJR 1, for property tax reset upon sale to sustain municipal services. Thank you. That is the end of our presentation. We'll take any questions.
Thank you so much. That was very educational for a lot of us. We do have questions. Our first question is from Assemblymember Karras.
Thank you, Chair. Good presentation, but I've got questions. I'm going to just lead with one because I know there are more. With Fernley's continued growth, you're going 20%, you're about to add 4,000 new homes in the next year or so with all your development plans. Does the city have plans to provide your own public safety? What I understood you're using, is it county services instead of your own?
Ben Marchant, City Manager for the record. That is correct. This is a topic that has been discussed over the years and constantly, especially as levels of service have fluctuated based on county revenues and services and staffing and leadership. Right now, in our most recent strategic planning session last month with the City Council is very happy with the level of service that the county sheriff is providing. We have a great partnership, great cooperation, and there doesn't seem to be a need to address that in-house. However, that's a recurring conversation, and we are prepared to study that further as the need arises.
Thank you, Art.
Chair?
Oh, go right ahead.
Sorry. Do you have a set number of population before you provide your own services?
That's really up to the perspective of the policymakers elected on the City Council, and I've received various opinions from other city staff and the public that we needed our in-house services before, now, or in the future, so there isn't a set number. It will really depend on those relationships and how efficiently we are functioning as a city.
Would you please state your name for the record again?
Ben Marchant, City Manager for the record.
Thank you. Our next question is from Assemblymember De Silva.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Mayor McIntyre and Mr. Marchant, for being here today. It's a pleasure to have you. I know there's a lot going on there in Fernley. Historically, there's been a lot. I mean, you have the Naval Air Station that's close by, the Gigafactory. I think one of the first Amazons ever in the country was out of Fernley. But I remember reading, in the papers, this goes back now to the recession, that this was one of the hardest hit areas in Nevada. The unemployment rate was one of the highest in the state. So I was just wondering, has there been any sort of work done in working against that and bringing down the unemployment rate and working on rejuvenating the economy in the Fernley area? Thank you.
Ben Marchant, City Manager for the record. Yes, Fernley suffered a bit of trauma in 2010 because with the dip in the economy, it actually lost more than 50% of its home value, and that impacted its property tax, because property tax is limited to go up only 3% per year, but nothing stops it from dropping 50%. And so the recovery has taken all 15 years since 2010 to get back to a place where revenues are at least adequate for maintaining our services. The unemployment is down, their jobs are plentiful, and in both Fernley and at Tahoe Reno Industrial Center, which is 15 miles down the road, there's a lot of activity. A lot of our residents commute either to Tahoe Reno Industrial Center or Reno Sparks. But Fernley is becoming less and less of a bedroom community and standing up more and more of its own jobs and services.
Thank you. Our next question is from Assemblymember Goulding.
Thank you. So to follow up on your last statement there, you piqued my interest earlier when you said that you were just a couple miles too shy of getting your own hospital. And I'm wondering if you could expand on that a little bit. Who or what made that determination?
Before the city reached the population threshold of 25,000, you would need a special determination in the state to get a hospital if you are less than 30 miles from the next nearest hospital. So the city of Fernley sits something like 28.1 miles from Banner Hospital in Fallon and 29.2 from Renown Hospital in Reno. And we don't have, between those two hospitals, there's very little interest in building a hospital here because they'd rather just bring the patients there. And so the mayor has made it a priority to reach out and try to get medical centers to come and consider Fernley. He's talked to Northern Nevada Medical Center, Carson Tahoe. We've talked to everybody. And while we've had some interest about possibly opening a basic trauma center where you could get a bone set and person stabilized for transport, right now, all we have is an urgent care facility that is only open until 7 or 8 p.m. and not on nights or weekends. So the level of medical services is greatly deficient in a city this size. My experience, I've worked as city manager for 18 years in 6 other cities and 5 other states, and I have a broad experience. And the smallest city I worked in was in Coquille, Oregon, population 3,800, county seat of Coos County, and they have a beautiful hospital for less than 5,000 people. And I can't understand how Fernley can function as big as it is without its own medical center.
Yes, if the speaker can state his name.
Ben Marchant, city manager, for the record. Thank you.
So quickly, who is it that made that determination? You said, is that a state
statute.
policy?
It's state
It's a
statute,
statute, okay. And do you have primary care providers? You say you have an urgent care clinic, but do you have primary care providers there in your community?
Ben Marchant, city manager, for the record. We do have medical offices for private practice, but I do not believe we have any hospital-like outpatient services.
Thank you. Our next question is from Assembly Member Jackson.
Thank you, Chair. I know you stated that public safety is not so much of an issue. That's why you don't have your own law enforcement. I'm curious, what is the $8 million expansion on the Justice Court? Is that just structural expansion?
Ben Marchant, city manager, for the record. That is an expansion of the Justice Center by the county to create more space and offices for their operation.
Follow-up, Chair. And just a concern with my fellow assembly member next to me, when you say that you don't provide your own public safety, does that include fire?
Benjamin Marchant, city manager, for the record, that is correct. Fire and emergency response services is provided by the North Lyon County Fire Protection District. It is an independent taxing district with its own elected board, and we work with them as best we can.
Thank you. And just a quick follow-up from the Assembly member's question. For that court, is that municipal and justice court or just municipal court?
Ben Marchant, city manager, for the record, that is just the county justice court. The city has a municipal court that it operates in City Hall.
Thank you. Our next question is from Assembly Member DeLong.
Thank you, Chair. Appreciate the presentation. Thank you very much. What is Fernley's water supply? Where do you get your water from?
Ben Marchant, city manager, for the record. Fernley has a very healthy water supply. We have 20,000 acre feet of water in reserve. We use about 9 1,000 acre feet of water. It's all pulled from groundwater at this time. Currently, we have a project to draw water from the Truckee Canal, which we will only be able to do during certain times of the year when the canal is full. It is closed at the wintertime, but that's fine because this is going to offset our peak usage during the summer irrigation season. And so we are upgrading our water treatment plant to be able to process the raw water from the canal with the groundwater. So we're building a 1.5 million gallon storage tank to hold the water, mix it so that we can process it in one batch. There are differences in the chemical properties of groundwater versus surface water, and so that's really important. We hope to begin testing of that at the end of this 2026 or this year, and that we'd start being able to deliver treated water in 2026.
Quick follow-up. Do you have rights from the state engineer for all that water?
Ben Marchant, City Manager, for the record, yes.
Thank you.
Thank you. I did have a question. You've mentioned housing a few times. A lot of people coming out to move to Fernley, the housing, the cost going down on existing homes because of the Great Recession, so those taxes being different. Just curious, what is the average cost of a home in Fernley right now?
Ben Marchant, City Manager, for the record. We've had some reports in the last couple of weeks, and over the last couple of months, it's fluctuated greatly between $340,000 to $422,000. Last number I saw was $387,000 was where it was sitting last week, but it's a moving target.
Thank you very much. Any other questions from the committee? Okay, well, thank you. Thank you, Mayor, for coming out. Thank you, City Manager, for the presentation. And you're all set. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Appreciate you.
We will now move to public comment. As a reminder, members of the public can provide public comment in person or telephonically and may submit public comment up to 24 hours after the meeting. Instructions for providing public comment can be found on the agenda. To provide public comment telephonically, dial 888-475-4499. When prompted to provide the meeting ID, enter 854-0991-0541, and then press pound when prompted for a participant ID. Each person will have 2 minutes to provide testimony, and as always, you could submit written public comment to the committee up to 24 hours after the hearing. Please remember to state your name clearly and spell your name for the record. Is there anyone here in Carson City that would like to give public comment? Seeing none, we go to Las Vegas, but there's no one in Las Vegas. So AVH, we will go to you for anyone giving public comment.
Chair, the public line is open and working. We have no callers for public comment at this time.
Thank you so much. The next meeting will be Monday, February 24th at 8 a.m. in this room. That concludes our meeting for today. The meeting is adjourned. Have a good weekend.